They say you never really notice the waiter at your table until the moment he shocks you. That night in New York, inside one of the city's most expensive restaurants, every eye turned when a young black waiter did the unthinkable. He spoke in flawless German, and the man who heard it wasn't just anyone. He was a billionaire, and what happened after changed the waiter's life forever. Marcus had been working double shifts for months, hustling to keep his mother's lights on and to scrape together tuition for the classes he dreamed of taking. By day he studied. By night, he carried trays of crystal glasses and plates, so expensive they could have covered a week's rent. He wore the same practiced smile most service workers learn to survive. But behind it was a mind alive with ambition. Marcus wasn't just a waiter. He was a linguist in the making, teaching himself German, French, and even bits of Mandarin by reading books. He borrowed from the library and listening to YouTube, lectures on his cracked phone. To most people who came through those doors, he was invisible. They ordered without looking him in the eye. They laughed too loudly as though his ears didn't exist. And some waved their hands at him like he was an object, not a man. Marcus learned to swallow it. But that night, fate gave him a moment that would burn itself into everyone's memory. At a corner table sat a sharply dressed man whose presence pulled the air tighter around him. His name was Mr. Reinhardt, one of Germany's wealthiest investors, a man the Wall Street elite whispered about but never approached lightly. His suit alone cost more than Marcus earned in 3 months, and his watch gleamed with the quiet arrogance of power. He was speaking German, rapid and fluid, to the man seated across from him. The words spilled smooth and commanding, completely unnoticed by anyone else. But Marcus noticed, and more than that, he understood. Every syllable, every phrase. He hovered by the table, steadying the tray in his hands, his heart pounding. Should he? Shouldn't he? He knew the risk. A black waiter speaking German to a billionaire could raise eyebrows, even suspicion. But something inside told him this was his moment. He leaned slightly forward and asked, in perfect German, "Would you prefer still water? Or sparkling, sir?" The words landed like a thunderclap. The billionaire's head snapped up, his piercing blue eyes narrowing in disbelief. His companion froze mid-bite, staring as though the air had shifted. The chatter of the room went on, but at that table, time stopped. You speak German?" Reinhardt asked slowly, switching into English, his accent sharp. Marcus met his gaze with quiet confidence. "Yes, sir. I taught myself." The weight of that reply hung in the air. Reinhardt's stare lingered, as though trying to see beyond the neatly pressed uniform, beyond the quiet demeanor. In that instant, Marcus wasn't just a waiter. He was a man with hidden brilliance, and Reinhardt knew it. But not everyone in the restaurant was impressed. At a nearby table, a group of businessmen had been drinking too much and laughing too loud. One leaned back in his chair, smirking as he muttered just loud enough for Marcus to hear. "What's next?" The janitor quoting Shakespeare. The table erupted in cruel laughter. Marcus heard every word. His chest tightened, but he didn't flinch. Years of dealing with remarks like that had taught him one thing: sometimes silence carried more strength than any retort. He kept his posture tall, his eyes calm, his dignity intact. But Reinhardt noticed everything. His gaze flicked toward the businessman with a cold sharpness, and his jaw clenched. He didn't say a word, but his expression spoke volumes. For the rest of the evening, Reinhardt's eyes followed Marcus, watching the way he moved through the dining room, the way he endured the dismissive waves, the way he kept his composure when others tried to strip him of it. There was power in that quiet dignity, and Reinhardt saw it. By the time dessert was served, something had shifted. This wasn't just about a waiter who spoke German anymore. It was about a man who refused to be defined by the smallness of other people's minds. When the bill came, Reinhardt didn't just sign it and leave. He slipped an envelope beneath the check, heavy and deliberate. His companion raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Reinhardt only gave a small, knowing nod. Marcus didn't find it until he came to clear the table. At first he thought it was a mistake, maybe a forgotten document. But when he opened it, his breath caught. Inside was a check. Not a tip, not a token gesture, but a life-changing sum, enough to pay off his mother's mortgage, cover his tuition, and put food on the table for years. But that wasn't what made his hands shake. It was the note that came with it. Written in neat German script, it said, "You are seen. Don't let small minds dim your brilliance. Use this as a key. The doors are waiting." Marcus stood frozen in the corner of the restaurant. clutching that note like it was made of fire. His throat tightened, and for the first time in years, his eyes stung with tears. This wasn't just money. It was recognition, it was respect, it was proof that, dignity and preparation, even in the face of prejudice, had power. The staff whispered when word spread. Some called it luck, others envy, but Marcus knew the truth. It wasn't luck. It was his discipline, his belief that his dreams were bigger than his circumstances, and somehow a billionaire had seen him in a way no one else ever had. What Marcus didn't know yet was that this night wasn't just about a tip or a kind note. Reinhardt hadn't just left money. He had left a door cracked open to a world Marcus had never imagined stepping into, and soon Marcus would learn that one moment of recognition could ripple out into something far larger, a story of dignity, justice, and the courage to rise when the world wanted him to stay invisible. Marcus hardly slept that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the envelope pressed against his chest as if he feared it might disappear. The note replayed in his mind in Reinhardt's stern, accented voice. "You are seen. Use this as a key. The doors are waiting." But which doors? And how was Marcus supposed to walk through them? By morning, reality tried to settle back in. Bill still sat on the kitchen counter. His mother still limped slightly as she moved around their tiny apartment. The weight of years of sacrifice in her bones. Nothing looked different. Yet everything felt different. That one act, the check, the note, had lit something inside Marcus. For the first time, he wasn't just dreaming about possibilities. He was holding one in his hands. When he showed the envelope to his mother, she covered her mouth, tears flooding her eyes. "Baby, this is God's way of telling you it's time," she whispered. "Time to stop hiding what's in you." But Marcus knew money alone wouldn't change how the world saw him. The businessmen's sneers from the night before still echoed in his ears. To them, he was still the waiter. To countless others, he was still just another young black man they could underestimate or dismiss. Money couldn't erase that. But maybe recognition could. 2 days later, a letter arrived at the restaurant, hand-delivered. Thick, cream-colored stationery embossed with a German seal. The manager pulled Marcus aside with a mix of envy and curiosity. "It's for you," he said, his tone stiff. Marcus's hands shook as he unfolded the letter. It was from Reinhardt himself. Written in English this time, the words were clear and direct. "Mr. Marcus, if you are willing, I would like you to meet me at my office in Midtown this Friday. I believe there is more to you than your current role allows. Do not come as a waiter. Come as the man you truly are." Marcus read it twice, 3 times, his pulse racing. An invitation from a billionaire? To his office? He could hardly believe it. Friday came faster than he expected. Marcus borrowed a suit from a church friend, pressed it carefully, and wore it with pride. When he walked into the glittering skyscraper where Reinhardt's company operated, heads turned. The young man who had carried trays now walked through marble lobbies lined with art, his back straight, his eyes steady. Reinhardt was waiting in a vast office overlooking the Manhattan skyline. He didn't rise immediately but studied Marcus as he entered, as though confirming what he had already guessed. "You came," Reinhardt said, finally standing and offering a hand. His grip was firm, his smile faint but real. "I couldn't say no, sir," Marcus replied. Reinhardt gestured to a seat. "Good, because I didn't bring you here for gratitude. I brought you here for possibility. Tell me, why German? Why languages?" Marcus took a breath. "Because language is a key, sir. People see you differently when you can speak their words. They listen. They respect you, and maybe they understand you better." Reinhardt's eyes lit up with interest. Spoken like a man who has felt the opposite. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "All my life." There was silence for a moment, heavy but not uncomfortable. Then Reinhardt leaned forward. "You know, Marcus, men who build empires are not impressed by wealth. It comes too easily once you've made your first fortune. What impresses us is hunger, drive. A man who studies German in secret while carrying plates at night, that is hunger. And hunger paired with dignity is unstoppable." Marcus swallowed hard. The words cut deep, not as flattery but as truth. "Here's what I'm offering," Reinhardt continued. "I can write a check that pays your bills and fund your education. But that would be charity, and charity doesn't change lives, it changes them. What I offer instead is opportunity. I will sponsor your education and international relations. I will open doors to internships, connections, experiences. But you must do the work. You must be ready to carry yourself with the same dignity I saw that night in the restaurant. Can you do that? Marcus's throat tightened. Yes, sir, I can. Reinhardt's faint smile returned. Good, then let us begin. That meeting was the start of something Marcus couldn't have scripted in his wildest dreams. Within weeks, he was enrolled in classes, sitting in lecture halls with students from every corner of the world. For the first time, he wasn't the invisible waiter blending into the background. He was Marcus, future diplomat, interpreter, advocate. But the journey wasn't smooth. Some classmates doubted him, whispering about how a waiter could afford such tuition, assuming his presence was charity. Professors asked pointed questions that carried the sting of condescension. The world, even in academia, was not free of prejudice. One afternoon, after a particularly harsh lecture where a professor dismissed one of his ideas, Marcus sat outside on the campus steps, frustration burning in his chest. It felt like no matter how hard he worked, the shadow of where he'd come from would never leave him. That's when Reinhardt called, as if sensing his struggle. Marcus, he said bluntly, do not let small men pull you down. You think I never faced arrogance? Even billionaires are mocked, envied, doubted. But those who win are the ones who let their work speak louder than the noise. Do the work, Marcus. The rest will follow. Those words became Marcus's anchor. Whenever doubt crept in, whenever prejudice reared its head, he remembered that night at the restaurant, the laughter of the businessmen, and Reinhardt's silent defense of his dignity. He remembered the note, "You are seen." Months passed and Marcus's brilliance became undeniable. He wasn't just learning languages. He was mastering them. Professors began to notice, then respect, then seek him out. Fellow students who once whispered began asking for his help. Step by step, the waiter who had once been invisible was becoming a man who could not be ignored. But the true test of dignity was still to come. Because while Reinhardt had opened the first door, it was Marcus who would soon have to walk into a room that would challenge not just his intelligence, but the very core of his identity. And when that moment came, it wouldn't just be about him. It would be about proving, once and for all, that dignity, courage, and brilliance are not bound by color or circumstance. The day of Marcus's greatest test came sooner than he expected. Reinhardt had invited him to attend an exclusive international business forum in Washington, D.C., a gathering of politicians, executives, and diplomats. For Marcus, it felt like stepping into another universe. Men in $1,000 suits moved with quiet arrogance. Women in tailored dresses spoke rapid French, Russian, and Mandarin. Every corner of the ballroom was thick with influence and power. Marcus adjusted his borrowed tie, his palms damp. He reminded himself of Reinhardt's words, "Do the work. The rest will follow." As the evening unfolded, Marcus stood beside Reinhardt, listening quietly as conversations swirled. Some people acknowledged him with polite nods. Others looked through him as though he weren't there. It was a familiar sting, but one he'd grown used to, until one moment threatened to shatter him. Across the room, a prominent American businessman, one Marcus recognized from television, raised his voice just enough for the nearby crowd to hear. He was speaking about the service staff, chuckling with his companions. Then his eyes flicked to Marcus. Funny how they let the help dress up and wander into these events now, he said, smirking. His friends laughed. The words weren't loud, but they cut deep. Marcus felt heat rush to his face. He froze, every instinct screaming at him to shrink, to disappear. Reinhardt, standing beside him, heard it too. His eyes narrowed. He leaned toward Marcus, his voice low. "This is your moment. Do not stay silent." Marcus's chest tightened. He looked around. The crowd was watching. If he spoke, he risked humiliation. If he stayed quiet, he would remain invisible. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus stepped forward. His voice, steady but powerful, rang out across the gathering. "Invisible is what I was in the restaurant," he said, locking eyes with the businessman. "But invisible is not what I am here. I've worked too hard, studied too long, and carried too much dignity to shrink. Because someone thinks the color of my skin defines me. It doesn't. What defines me is the knowledge I carry, the languages I speak, and the doors I will open." The room fell silent. The businessman shifted uncomfortably, his smirk gone. A ripple of murmurs spread, but Marcus didn't flinch. He continued, switching effortlessly into German, then French, then back into English, his words flowing like music. "Respect," he said firmly, "isn't given by titles or money. It's earned by how we treat others. And tonight I choose to stand in my dignity, not your prejudice. For a moment, the entire room seemed suspended in awe. Then slowly, applause began, soft at first, then louder, until the room filled with clapping hands. Reinhardt's expression was proud. His faint smile, carrying the weight of approval Marcus had once only dreamed of earning, that night changed everything. Marcus was no longer just Reinhardt's protege. He was a voice, a presence, a force people could not ignore. Within weeks, invitations poured in for panels, for internships, for opportunities that once seemed impossible. Professors who once dismissed him now quoted his words. Students who once whispered behind his back now asked for his mentorship. But Marcus didn't let it swell his pride into arrogance. He remembered where he came from, the tiny apartment, the weary look in his mother's eyes, the cruel laughter of those businessmen at the restaurant, and he remembered Reinhardt's note, "You are seen." He knew his mission wasn't just about himself anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been made to feel small, invisible, or unworthy. Years later, Marcus stood on the stage of an international summit, no longer in a borrowed suit, but in one tailored to his own success. Cameras flashed, leaders leaned forward to listen, and his mother sat in the front row with tears in her eyes. My journey began carrying trays, Marcus told the audience, his voice steady and resonant. But what I carried most wasn't plates or glasses, it was dignity. And dignity is something no one can take from you unless you give it away. I was once a waiter who dared to speak in another man's language. Tonight I stand here as a man who speaks for those still waiting to be seen. And I promise you this, the world cannot ignore us forever. The room erupted with applause, a standing ovation that seemed to last forever. Reinhardt, older now but still sharp, sat in the wings, pride evident in his eyes. He had given Marcus a key, but Marcus had built the house. And as Marcus looked out over the sea of faces, he understood the truth of his journey. Recognition matters. Opportunity matters. But what matters most is the choice to hold on to dignity, no matter who tries to strip it away. That choice is what turns a waiter into a leader, a quiet voice into a powerful one, an invisible man into a man the world cannot forget. The story of Marcus wasn't just about a billionaire's generosity. It was about resilience, pride, and the courage to speak when silence was safer. It was about proving that brilliance knows no color, no uniform, no class. And somewhere in another restaurant, another young worker carried a tray, unaware that his moment was waiting too. That instant where dignity, courage, and preparation would collide to open doors he never thought possible. Because sometimes all it takes is one voice, one moment, one act of courage to remind the world, we are seen.